Okay. Thanks.
I think you have to tell
Thanks, comrades. If everybody can mute themselves.
Matthew, I'll give you. I'll make you co-host. You can.
Okay. All right. Do that. That'll be easier. Okay.
Rabbi Matthew.
Yeah, also. Okay, right. Okay, thanks, Corey. Sorry, I just muted everybody so we can make a start. Obviously, you can unmute when you're called. Okay, so today, it's basically extremely important time, as we know, as we can see in the world. The ruling classes across the world are preparing or participating in war and genocide. They're prepared quite clearly in order to maintain their own power in desperate efforts to do so, to kill millions. There's no question or issue of that. And the question really then becomes, what is the response of the left and the working class? Can these wars be stopped? Obviously, wars in order to maintain capitalist power are completely even more ridiculous and fruitless now than they ever have been. So obviously under these conditions, the act of the Indian ruling class and its political operatives to foment war in the subcontinent, as a whole piece of that global position, is particularly dangerous and particularly important. And today, and I think it's really appropriate and of a great import that we have comrades from both sides of that divide and that potential conflict to speak today, and the question of how is that war, how can there be a campaign to stop that war? So speaking, we have two comrades. If I can call them, manage that. There's Ashim Roy, who's the General Secretary of the New Trade Union, founder of the New Trade Union Initiative and the Asia Floor Alliance, which is a new union federation across India, and Haris Kadir, who's a Kashmiri Marxist, obviously at the actual cockpit of the conflict, and a member of the Central Committee of the organisation The Struggle. So we'll ask two comrades to speak for 10 minutes each, and then people can contribute. And I'm thinking this will probably be a particularly important and useful discussion. Thanks. So, Ashim, do you want to speak first then? He is here. No?
Please unmute yourself.
Thanks, comrades. I wish you all a good, whatever it is, an evening and morning. I'm looking forward to this discussion with respect to the situation that has arisen in the Southern Asia context. As I think generally the people who are in this meeting would have already, I don't need to explain, or an assumption can be made of what is the kind of politics that the ruling class takes place. But I think the specificity of the India-Pakistan issue, and particularly the Kashmir issue, is an important factor which has led to the escalation of a war situation in the South Asian continent. Now, I want to just broadly make three core points, and the three core points the whole what has actually happened is, I think, in a way, it is both an escalation to its limit, and at the same time, it has brought the ruling class and particularly the BJP, which is the ruling party, and Mr. Modi into a kind of political crisis, because in some way it was meant to be a kind of escalation which could have addressed some of the concerns that they think which is of a cross-border interventions, or terrorism, if you want to call it, whichever the nomenclature one uses. And yet in the actual reality, what it has done is that it has created almost like an impasse between the two ruling classes in terms of trying to figure out how to move forward. Because it is very, very easy, and this is exactly what I think has been learned, that the fact that we had the ruling class in India, for political reasons, and I don't want to get well on it, had a strategic restraint as a political option. The whole military political framework was of a strategic restraint. I think the present government is the one which has moved from strategic restraint to one which is what they want to call is in terms of a military escalation. And there is a whole lot of issues, including the kind of what has happened in Kashmir, the nullification of 370 and 35A, all that are matters of fact. But the real point is that they have built up a new doctrine, which is a very dangerous doctrine, that any kind of cross-border intervention has to be responded only by a cross-border military strike. Now, this escalates to a level where actually we come to a situation where either we are nearer to a very war situation, which I have been saying for the last 4 years, but nonetheless, a situation which has now gone outside the control, in many ways outside the control of the two states. What I mean is that anyone actually, by a terrorist attack, can actually see that the India responds in a very different way. And so in many ways, the control of the foreign policy between two states have actually got out of their hand. And this is a very dangerous situation. Till now, for whatever right or wrong historical reason, we at least had a control over the political situation, had a control over interstate relationships. I think the new situation is very dangerous in the sense that actually it takes away the political autonomy of those states to be able to control the situation, which is a very dangerous in my viewpoint. And that's the scenario that we are in. Now, going back from that to the situation that what would be a response of the Indian and Pakistan people? Again, I don't think we need to dwell upon in this group on the historical context of what has happened. There has been a historical division, whether we like it or not like it, the historical division. And this is, again, I don't want to dwell on it, but one has a viewpoint that we are a part of one civilizational framework. In fact, we share I speak to Comrade Harris in the language that he can speak to, though I'm an Indian. And yet I can speak the language, and I can speak the language almost in every South Asian country. So the point is that there is a certain kind of cultural resources that we have. And in our anti-colonial struggle, we all moved from civilization to nation states and to people's rights. And yet we are come to a point when nation states can't come into a kind of a relationship that can bring peace to this area. This impasse and this warlike situation that has erupted or has come nearer, as I said, in a certain sense, the whole matrix has changed, and in many ways, other countries outside the region can actually decide how our responses will be, has shifted the whole paradigm in many ways among the people. Now, what would be the response on this kind of situation? And this is where I feel, and I have been kind of part of a long process. We have been a part of Indo-Pak Friendship Association. We have been trying to build the People's SARC. And I think there's a whole tradition in the South Asia which has called for, some kind of a South Asian framework. As one of the regions, and I believe that this region needs to respond as a region to many of the global issues. There's the resources, there's a tradition, there's a very powerful left tradition in all the countries to build on that. And yet somehow we have kind of disengaged ourselves from the South Asian process. So I would say that this impasse and this crisis, which is at least I can feel it in Indian political system, the impasse between two states has actually created an opportunity in some sense to build up a peace offensive in the region. And I would like to submit that there should be a peace offensive framework that we all should try to work out, which is for South Asia. And I would call it the South Asia for peace and democracy, because terrorism can only be fought by a democratic means. Nowhere in the world has terrorism or any way insurgents of any kind been dealt with in a military form. And so I think history has taught us enough to tell us that we can't deal it in a militaristic fashion. So the question comes up that how do we build this peace offensive? And I think the peace offensive can only be framed if we frame it in a South Asian framework, because it has got a historical legacy on which you can stand on and build on. That's the second point we want to say, that we do have to come and not, I know many of us here are radicals. We believe in socialism. We believe in revolution. But socialism and revolution still requires at least an interstate framework, a peaceful framework. And I think it's important from the people's point of view in this region that we talk and bring back the whole SARC process, build back the whole idea of peace and democracy in the South Asia, and really struggle for building up institutions of those kind which can help. In that, we will have beyond, I think, at least in India, and I know that's in Pakistan too, there are strong traditions beyond the left which can build and contribute to this peace process, and I think we should build on that. That brings me to the last point which I want to say, and I want to say this in a larger sense, that in the global scenario that has emerged, and one can talk and discuss more about it, I think an opportunity has come both in the post-globalization phase, particularly after, in a certain sense, a crisis in globalization, which I call a crisis in imperialist globalization, that we have come to a point where actually there is a possibility of building up a peace offensive. And I think the peace offensive is of a global kind. I think everywhere, the viewpoint, if you were to look at the viewpoint of peace, the viewpoint of war and the viewpoint for pro-war has also increased, but the viewpoint for peace and realization that in the today's world, when the first phase of nation states have been over globally, except for exceptional areas like Palestine, Kashmir, and Kurdistan, and maybe a few areas which I am not aware of, like Basque in Spain, things like areas like that. Essentially, we have come to a nation states framework, and there are borders issues, there are other issues which I think are insignificant to the larger framework of peace that we're talking about. All border issues in the global world can be negotiated and settled. So can India and Pakistan, and so can India and China for that matter. So the question comes up that what is and this is where the point which I want to stress, that I think it is time that there is a people's movement, that we start conceptualizing something called a people's foreign policy, or foreign policy not decided by the states, but foreign policy decided by people. And in many ways, the people and the working class of region, the working class globally, can actually come to some terms together to think of how the peace process can be initiated. And this is where I would say we should interrogate against each of our own states in terms of foreign policy. And I think we should start speaking about what is the people's foreign policy. And people's foreign policy will always have a component, and I think an integral component, which will be common to most of the working class movement everywhere, of peace and democracy. So I feel that, let's take an example, and I'll add into the point, that the state impasse has forced Indian state to send a delegation of parliamentary to the world. What does it really mean? It means the state itself cannot anymore control the narrative of interstate relationship. The states itself cannot control the foreign policy narrative that every state is doing it, which means the foreign policy narrative has gone beyond the state's control. And this is an historical opportunity for people's movement to intervene. And I think if parliamentarians can intervene outside the state, outside even an opposition framework can speak, then I think the concept of a people's framework, of a people's taking away the position on various issues of democracy and various issues of war and peace in their different states will help in creating a momentum for a larger peace movement. And I am really committed, and I hope in the next few years we will have some movement in this direction in the South Asia. And I'm looking forward to inputs from all of you to shape that out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Comrade. That was really useful and interesting. Harris?
Thank you, comrades. I don't have electricity, so I can't open my camera. So you guys, thank you. First of all, Comrade Ashim, I think made some suggestions about the situation in India and Pakistan, and overall in South Asia. I think I would like to discuss this situation escalating in this region. To begin with today's agenda, we must understand the recent events in the, I think, in the context of historical evolution of this region, subcontinent. In recent days, a warlike situation has developed between Pakistan and India, and celebrations of victory are taking place on both sides. I think the current conflict emerged following a militant attack in the scenic tourist destination of Pahalgam in Jammu Kashmir. Allegedly, 4 or 6 militants carried out a targeted and unprovoked shooting, killed 26 people, among those Hindu civilians from Indian states, one Muslim citizen from Jammu Kashmir, and a Nepali national. I think maybe I am wrong. India's ruling elite, specifically BJP in the government, which is committed to the Hindutva agenda, has used this attack to divert attention from its own internal contradictions and crises. Without any investigation, the blame was immediately placed on Pakistan. Jammu Kashmir's Muslim population was collectively targeted, and environment was created which it was portrayed that Hindus are unsafe in India and Muslims are the culprits. On the other hand, the Pakistani government termed the incident as a false flag operation. The Indian government's anti-Muslim and anti-Pakistan actions were used to reaffirm Pakistan's traditional two-nation theory that Hindus and Muslims are two different nations and they cannot live together. As a whole, a warlike atmosphere was created on the both sides of borders. Media outlets converted into war rooms, and warmongering began across the border. Eventually, during the night of May 6 and 7, India launched a missile strike, escalating the conflict further. I think in the span of 4.5 days, over 100 civilians were killed on both sides, including large number of women and children. As always, Jammu and Kashmir bore burnt of the violence. More than thousands of homes were destroyed, hundreds of properties ruined, and thousands of families were temporarily displaced to safer areas. Once again, it has become evident that the ruling classes of the both countries are neither capable of waging a full-scale war or establishing a long-term peace. Uh, these two states, born from the imperialist partition of subcontinent, they have historically have been plagued by a chronic backwardness. Uh, I think due to specific patterns of capitalist development and underdevelopment in this region, the ruling classes have been unable to modernize the society or fulfill the tasks of national democratic revolution. As a result, issues ranging from feudalism to national oppression remained unresolved. Even today, with uh, almost 80% of the population of both sides are of the border are facing the lack of access to clean drinking water. 25 to 30% of the world's poverty relies in these two countries. Religion has not been separated from the state in a real sense. In fact, the very existence of these states seems to rely on the instrumentalization of religion. Historically, Pakistan still exists as a religion state, while India's secular constitution is being undone by BJP ruling elite. Historically, however, in, even India's ruling class has used religion as a tool to try to run the state as Hindu majoritarian republic. The issue of Jammu and Kashmir remains an open, festering, and a festering wound left behind during the partition of subcontinent. This wound is the one that can easily exploited to reignite the crimes of the partition. In 1947, the region of Jammu Kashmir was divided between two states under the directions of imperialist forces. It was formerly a princely state, uh, home to a diverse mixed nationalities, ethnicities, languages, and cultures. Uh, was held under despotic rule of feudal monarch backed by British imperialism. However, uh, after 1947, this region was partitioned without granting the right of self-determination to its people. There have been already three major wars fought over this issue: sporadic cross-border firing across LOC line of control or ceasefire line has continued since ever. Uh, this issue has been used by the ruling class of both states to preserve their power and distract from internal crisis. Once again, war is being imposed on the region in the name of this unresolved issue, this war and the war-like atmosphere surrounding it. And uh, it was an imposition by the ruling elite and its victims, as always, the uh, oppressed and subjugated people of this region. The people of the oppressed nationalities, workers, peasants, and youths of this region cannot be uh, 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 solve problems through any warlike situation or war. They have no mutual enmity. Their problems are common, and their struggle must also be common or united. The working class on both sides of the border and in Jammu Kashmir as well, they must oppose this war and the warlike environment. Uh, the working class should launch a joint struggle against imperialism, capitalism, and capitalist system of governance. Until I think capitalism is abolished from this region, the cycle of destructions will not end And in the end, I think it is the only solution that through overthrowing this system and establishment of a voluntarily socialist federation of free and independent nations that can resolve the problems and the end the destruction of imperialism and capitalism and the wars of capitalism and imperialism. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you, comrade. Again, very, very interesting contribution. Now, obviously, we have a fairly limited amount of time. So if people can get their contributions in as soon as possible, rather than having a silence now and a great rush at the end. Roger, did you want to say something? You need to unmute yourself.
Right, comrades, can you hear me? Yeah. Right. First of all, I think thank you very much. I think it's a matter of pride that we've been able to invite comrades from India and Pakistan. It's probably one of the few gatherings where comrades from both countries are able to meet together. And I'd like to say also that I made a little computation. We've got comrades also from Britain, Ireland, USA, Argentina, Cyprus, Denmark, Namibia, Bangladesh, and I'm sorry if I've missed out anybody. So that's internationalism. Now, I just want to make a few points about the background to this conflict. First of all, obviously, a whole kind of poisonous element has come into world relations in the last period. We see, the economic conflict. We see, and we see, along with the genocidal bloodbath in Gaza and the Middle East, and the endless war in Ukraine, and the civil wars still raging in Yemen, Sudan, and the Congo. This conflagration could prove even more explosive between India and Pakistan, and it's a sign of the dangerous volatility of world relations today. And I'd like to say something a little bit about the background. Like Palestine, Kashmir is a kind of mangled relic of the crimes of British imperialism, which wantonly promoted internecine communal hatred, just as they did in Ireland and in Cyprus and in Kenya and Sri Lanka, wherever else it set foot, in order to divide and rule. The communal murder by Islamic terrorists of Hindu tourists in Kashmir, which started off this whole latest conflict, is it's only the latest in a long line of similar events, like the multiple bombings in Mumbai in 1993 and the indiscriminate killings of civilians in Mumbai again in 2008. But the hands of the equally commonly motivated BJP government of Modi are no less stained with innocent blood. Not only did Modi preside over a massacre of Muslims when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat in 2002, but more recently we see how Muslim migrants who've been settled for generations in Assam and the outlying states of the northeast were arbitrarily flung into special detention camps to face mass deportation as illegal immigrants, so-called, who had infiltrated from Bangladesh. And again, we have to go back to the horrible legacy of British imperialism, because in 1946 there was a subcontinental uprising which was explicitly anti-communal. It rallied in defence of the three token prisoners of war, prisoners of the British. They were Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh, who were victimised for their participation in the Indian National Army, as it was called, who are now facing a show trial. And there was a tsunami of strikes, hartals, armed uprisings. Indian Navy ratings, that's the Indian sailors, overthrew their British officers and they literally threw them overboard. And they trained their guns onto the financial and administrative headquarters of British imperial rule in Mumbai. And the British really fled for their lives. And just as they left, as they did in other countries like in Ireland and Cyprus and Palestine, they lit a fuse as they left for an explosion of communal war, in which literally, in the case of India and Pakistan, literally 1 million or even many millions perished. It was one of the bloodiest crimes in British history. And when they decided to partition the subcontinent, they actually, the way it was done, it was they just sent an obscure minor civil servant from somewhere on the suburbs of London who had never even been abroad, and he was thrown in with a mandate to draw a map of the newly partitioned country. He had no knowledge of the terrain or the people, and he just scribbled a hasty map at random. And as he left, he said, I don't know if I've got it right, but what difference does it make? Because after all, they'll only start fighting over it again as soon as I fly home. And so Pakistan was actually a kind of artificial construct invented by ambitious careerist politicians by arbitrarily linking those states or territories where Muslims were in a minority. The very name was hurriedly and inaccurately devised to incorporate the initial letters. These are Punjab, Afghania, Kashmir, Sindh, Baluchistan, Pakistan. So the K in Pakistan actually stood for Kashmir. India's Muslim communal politician Jinnah had insisted on a separate state. Then he thought, right, Kashmir belongs to us. The British eagerly granted his demand and presented an acquiescent Congress with a fait accompli. By that time, Gandhi was simply playing the role of a kind of saintly guru above the fray. But all the practical negotiations were left to the hard-headed politicians of Congress, who were happy to finally achieve even an albeit truncated variant of state power. Sorry about all the history. I just want to make one or two very quick points. Aside from the strategic motives like control of the water supply, proximity to China, etc., the considerations of prestige are at stake here too. Pakistan wanted to boost its credentials as the home of all the Muslims of the region, even of East Bengal, as it was called, 1,000 miles away, which very soon broke away, quite understandably, to form Bangladesh. And conversely, as leaders of the dominant Hindu community, Gandhi and Nehru had been anxious to promote India as a secular entity, so it suited that masquerade to include a Muslim majority state in post-partition India. And that left the Hindu princely ruler of Jammu and Kashmir some margin to bargain for special protected status, playing off the two sides. And on that basis, India was content to grant certain concessions, like a degree of autonomy, a separate flag, a ban on settlement from beyond its borders, so as to guarantee its demographic identity. And it is those limited rights that 3 or 4 years ago were brutally torn up by Modi. He staged an overnight coup, abolishing Kashmir's statehood and revoking its autonomous status, cutting all its communication links and flooding it with occupation troops. So as with Hamas's October the 7th attack in Israel, so too with this latest attack by Islamic terrorists in Kashmir. To use this latest single incident to justify an orgy of revenge and to disregard the long historical chain of injustice that lay behind it is just twisting reality. And a regime of pure terror was inflicted on the people of Kashmir, and the unilateral deprivation of Kashmir's already severely limited autonomy and statehood was a coup almost comparable to Hitler's annexation of Austria or Czechoslovakia. But that's the truth behind the nightmare that could well lie ahead. I don't think this conflict is over. There's a very uneasy stalemate, if you like, at the rest, but at the time. But unless we are constantly vigilant, and unless the working class can reassert its demand for unity and peace, then the danger of a huge conflict is still there, involving nearly 2 billion people in the two warring countries. But just one last thing, the working class does have a voice, as Comrade Ashim quite rightly pointed to. That we had the overthrow of the dictatorship in Sri Lanka. We had the overthrow of the dictatorship in Bangladesh. Both of those just in the last 2 or 3 years. We've had complete political instability in Pakistan. And in India, we've had this huge display of the potential strength of the working people of India. We had the farmers' siege, 300,000, 3 lakh farmers besieged Delhi for months on end and completely paralyzed the administration. And on top of that, we've had again and again and again token strikes. Yes, true, only token strikes, but token strikes of 2 days, 4 or 5 times in the last few years, of an unbelievable 250 million workers, 25 crore workers. And that shows the enormous potential strength of the working class. So it's a great matter of pride for us in Workers' International Network that we're hosting this meeting and that we're able to give a voice to the working class of both belligerent countries. So thanks very much, comrade.
Okay, thanks, Roger. Does anybody else want to contribute? Wait. I think I would ask a couple of questions myself. I think, I mean, first of all, obviously, is the role of the Trump administration itself, and obviously the move both to try and enact a greater tribute from the rest of the world by use of tariffs and other such methods. And the effect of that has on the rest of the world, particularly obviously India. And the question then also becomes, in terms of because obviously the Americans have moved from basically they've always had an alliance with Pakistan, and they've now shifted obviously towards more orientation towards India. But at the same time, also the Trump administration is actually sacking much of its expertise on great chunks of the world. So in those terms, it is blinding itself. So it'd be interesting to know what the actual impact of what the Trump administration is doing is on the two countries. The other thing, of course, that is the issue of water, because Modi did announce that he was tearing up the water treaty, which of course is absolutely critical. And the question would be then, will the Indian state or proceed and the Indian ruling class proceed to actually try and remove any portion of the water that Pakistan depends upon? Any hands indication? No. Ian, did you want to say anything?
Perhaps Ashim and Harris might like to make a few more
Sure.
comments.
Yeah.
Well, I actually did not go into detail because I assumed that a lot of comrades here are aware of the history of India-Pakistan issues. This is Roger, your viewpoint. I do historically the nation building process in this South Asia continent has its complexity, and I think it cannot be simply reduced to the idea of that Pakistan is an artificial construct. This is exactly the concept that the right wing today speaks about, that Pakistan is an artificial construct. So it is not right to say that Pakistan is an artificial construct. Historically, it's like this, that in many parts of this, what I was trying to say, that we have a civilization which has a cultural notion, but never had defined boundaries in its internal levels. So different people and different nationalities picked up the forms of how to build up nation states here. That's a very more complicated, unlike, we have a whole of, it's a European continent being broken up into 3 states. So there's a historical basis to that. So what I would say that at this point, what is important is not to contest the Pakistan nations as a construct, but surely question the state as a construct. And that is very important. And I think the Indian state and the Pakistan state both have a kind of a religious fundamentalism in its underbelly. It has always been there. Even when it is secular, it had that trend. And that's why many of the issues, Kashmir issue is an issue that can be resolved if the 2 states had a political will. We have almost come to a resolution, except for the political opinion. And the reality is that the Indian left movement and the progressive movement couldn't build up a political movement to take that on. Let's take an example. Before 2019, when the Indian government revoked 370 and 35A, which is a very important way of legally looking at what was autonomy in India, the reality is that, and this is again, all military experts have told this again and again, we have not changed the military line from 1949. 47 to 49, we have been fighting 3 wars, but not an inch has moved here and there. It's a war that has no end. So the question is, why can't we convert this military line into a line of international border? If we can do that, the question of peace in 2 sides of Kashmir comes up. The question of 2 sides people can move into a democratic space, and maybe we will live in again a framework. After all, today also, Punjab is divided into 2 parts of this world. My own, I'm an ethnically Bengali. My majority Bengali. My family is half in Bangladesh. I used to be in Bangladesh. And I am in India, but the Bangla nation doesn't cease to exist for that matter. So the question is, these realities have to be accepted in countries like South Asia. And if we have a border which is porous, if you have a demilitarization in the border, this region will become a peaceful fashion. So this doesn't require a massive revolution in either of these 2 countries. This requires just a democratic opinion to consolidate around that we can't anymore fight war, and we need this border to be frozen up in some fashion that we can live in peace. So I was just giving an example of this kind, and this has come on again, both governments came to, we all know this, second track negotiation happened, state-to-state negotiation happened, all came to we almost had a convergence on this issue. Again, the right-wing government lost its nerve, the Congress government earlier lost its nerve, and we couldn't come to a resolution. So I just want to kind of say that it is possible to live in peace in this area. Unfortunately, the Kashmir episode Kashmir is not being resolved, and it has got into this religious division, and that religious division is actually eroding the class movement and the people's movement. I do want to say, which is a kind of very important element, which I think Matthew just brought it out, that let's look at Trump. The Trump framework, Trump, actually, the US framework it's actually something very interesting that Indian state still believes that the US has a power relation to South Asia and Asia. It is actually living in a fool's paradise, and this is where the reality of actual international relationship has to happen. We can be autonomous, but we cannot be at this point pro-US. The US can't deliver. The US can't deliver anything in this part of the world. It couldn't deliver something in Pakistan. It couldn't deliver something in Afghanistan. Let's forget about doing it in South Asia. So I really feel water, I think India is really wrong. This water issue, Indus Water Treaty, is totally illegal. And I hope there is a global movement for people to, and the left movement and the progressive movement should come up that this is something, because this is a normative framework which shouldn't be broken. And if we break, India's in a wrong frame. If India does that to Pakistan, the same thing will happen in Tibet, and China will take advantage of it. And let's not forget, all our river system are linked up to the Himalayas. After all, Himalayas is a region that really divides and links up all of us together. And if we were to fight in one area of Himalayas, all areas of Himalaya will become contention. And that's a dangerous proposition. I think sensible people in both parts, I know policymakers in India who do not believe this. The last section of people who work with water and work with the riverine system. And this is against Geneva Convention. This is against almost 3 international convention under UN systems, which has been on the water issue. So I think in this, the India is on the weak ground. But the reality is, as I said, this has to become a part of the people's foreign policy. Water has to be made into a trans-border issue. Water cannot be decided by one nation. These are the issues in which people's movement can actually take issues out of the hands of the state and make it into a people's foreign policy. That's what I would submit. And I think that's the potential that we have.
Okay, thanks, Comrade. Comrade Harris, did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Comrade. I think Comrade Rajar has explained briefly the situation of Indo-Pak with the historic context, and Comrade Ashim has answered the questions about Trump negotiation and the water issues between India and Pakistan. Basically, when the Modi regime tried to revoke the Indus Water Treaty. But I think the Indian government has not the capacity to divert these waters, these rivers from to flowing towards Pakistan. I would like to I would like to explain some more things about specifically with the in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. Because Jammu and Kashmir continues to be the fuel for the war hysteria between Pakistan and India, and indirectly nearly 1.75 billion people across both the countries are paying the price of this madness in the name of national defense and the tax money of the working masses is being handed over the imperialist arm manufacturers because both the countries cannot manufacture the arms which are specifically used in wars. The entire war industry is profiting from the helplessness and the dispossession of the working people of this region. On the other hand, this warlike scenario is also being used to advance imperialist objectives and interests. China is displaying the promotion displays and promoting its weapons at the global level has been framed around this conflict. One Chinese analyst openly declared that there is no better advertisement than a real combat situation. Uh, I think this single statement lays bare the mindset of the ruling class and the true aims of imperialist power. Si- Similarly, American, US imperialism and European powers have treated this warlike situation as a live demonstration of Chinese defense capabilities. This conflict has also laid bare the reality of the 1947 partition, which was falsely celebrated as independence. Even after 77 or 78 years, the true extent of autonomy of the ruling classes of these two countries was exposed when a ceasefire was declared by US President Donald Trump. Finally, I would like to say that despite the efforts of the ruling elites, uh, they have been unable to nurture war hysteria and national chauvinism at the scale they had hoped. Yes, they have managed to temporarily suppress mass movements and assert state control, but whether it's the ongoing movement in Pakistani occupied Jammu Kashmir, the struggle in Pakistani occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, the Balochistan, and also struggles in Pashtun region, Sindh, and on the various expressions, as Roger Silverman has explained, the resistance on the other side of the border, the situation will not remain under control for the long time or long period. Across this region, workers, peasants, and youth are already rising up in scattered ways. I think they are challenging the system. Uh, it won't be long before these struggles uh, converge to and connect and united as well. We have very, I think, very little time and a massive task lies before us that to prepare an alternative leadership. Uh, if the rising of the movements in this region are provided a united leadership, the working class of the region will not stop short of overthrowing the capitalist system. And I think without overthrowing capitalism from this region, these problems cannot be solved. And Jammu Kashmir issue is not just a border uh, issue or a conflict between two countries. It is the issue of uh, uh, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the right of self-determination of people of Jammu and Kashmir, and this issue can be solved only to giving right of self-determination to people of Jammu and Kashmir. And in this system, in both these states and also imperialist forces cannot mediate this conflict and also cannot give right of self-determination to people of Jammu and Kashmir. So I think the even when capitalism is existing, we cannot solve these issues between India and Pakistan and also the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, comrade. Ian, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. I thought it was very interesting what speaker was saying about final status in Kashmir. I was wondering, another alternative I'd heard about, I was involved in Kashmir Solidarity a few years ago, was the issue of a plebiscite that Nehru had agreed to but never actually followed up on. And that the UN mandated in the very early days, late 40s of the conflict, for Kashmir to vote either to be in India or in Pakistan or an independent country of both of them, as opposed to the Indian position seems particularly ridiculous that the sole decision was made by the Maharaja. Yeah, I wonder if that's still a demand that should be raised, or if it would be more practical. What the speaker was saying, what other comrades would think about the line of control. Also, Modi's increasing alignment to Israel. In the olden days, one thing India and Pakistan actually agreed about was they both supported the Palestinians. Now Modi is obviously pushing a pro-Israel, basically on a communal anti-Muslim basis, but also because of his alignments with imperialism. And if there's actually a desire to see this as an October the 7th moment in his base. The atmosphere coming out of some people in India that we've seen on the mainstream media over here, that we've always seen it as a problem with the Pakistani regime before, but now we're against the Pakistani people as well, quite reminiscent of the terrible public discourse in Israel itself. So that's being deliberately exported by the far right. And then also the issue of the Pakistani government, which is very weak and illegitimate at the moment, because the most popular party was banned, the most popular prime minister candidate still in jail. The army basically rigged the thing for the United States. And so will that make it a perhaps weaker government in response to India's provocations? Or on the other hand, it could be like Galtieri, comprador government, but nationalistically adventurous. So what do comrades think about that? And finally, the nuclear issue. I think we've seen in Ukraine, it could have been worse in the last 3 years. There's not been a nuclear exchange. But the fact that we've been having this Cuban Missile Crisis, but way extended for 3 years, I don't know if it's kind of destroying the idea of nuclear possession of nuclear weapons deterring conventional war. So could it, these two nuclear powers think they could be even more trigger happy because they're not world superpowers and they're right next to each other? Or is there still a long way to go, hopefully, and for the workers to intervene in the meantime before it could escalate to that nightmare scenario?
Okay, thanks. Can we tell us? You need to unmute yourself.
I'm always reluctant to speak on something that I know so little about. I mean, I know the general picture, but not the details. Nevertheless, listening to the speakers and the discussion reminded me a lot of what has been discussed heavily in Cyprus on the interplay of nationalism, national issues, and class struggle and socialism. And there was in Cyprus as well this reluctance to accept that there can't be any solution of the national issue, so we should concentrate on building the revolution. But the counter argument to this, which I think is very important, is that the existence of the national issue, they don't allow the development of class organizations and revolutionary work. But while there may be a lot of truth that capitalism is a very strong impediment to the solution of national questions, and it might be in the final analysis impossible to solve these issues within capitalism. At this stage, before there is a revolutionary outlook, we have to fight for peace and for stability and for serving the people. And through this fight, through this struggle, all the difficulties will surface in front of everybody. And everybody will start understanding the deeper issues. And hopefully we shall be more ready to convince people that we need more radical actions. In any case, a revolution in these countries can only start as a democratic revolution, as an answer to immediate problems. And that would necessarily develop much further than the original slogans and the original demands. And we have to adjust our policies as we go along. We have to see that this is a sort of chicken and egg situation, and we cannot neglect the one because of the other. Otherwise, we are being led to a situation where we lose contact with the social consciousness, with the consciousness of the working class, and it's pointless to have nice plans if nobody listens to us. I have for a long time argued that socialism in most countries of the periphery is impossible, because imperialism will always be able to overcome any revolutionary situations, as we have seen happening in some Latin American countries. And one could never imagine socialism in Cyprus surviving for any length of time, and we should be tying up all this with the international agenda, and everybody should do that. nevertheless, we should be aware, should be very careful to realize that in some countries, a revolutionary movement, a successful revolution, could have tremendous effect on the world situation. I mean, we have seen that in the recent events in Bangladesh, when the whole world was shaken by what was happening, and if that was had moved any further, it could trigger events elsewhere. That's much more true with a situation like that of India and Pakistan. They are huge countries, important countries, and although at this stage it's impossible to go far beyond peace and democracy slogans, inevitably there is always the possibility there that an explosion of revolutionary events lead from one thing to another and triggering off revolution in the whole subcontinent. And if that happens, it won't be contained there. I mean, we have seen it in the Arab Spring happening. It was just a very minor event in Tunisia that triggered revolution in Tunisia, and all the Arab countries had revolutionary movements. Had this movement managed to join up and create a common front with common slogans, and they could go far beyond normal democratic slogans and build a revolution that it would be much more difficult to suppress by imperialist intervention. So I think that we should both be moderate enough to realize that we cannot jump to a revolution, but at the same time not to lose the realization that we live in an era that these revolutions could just explode where we don't expect them, and be ready to intervene positively.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade. I think that's useful. Anyone else? Norma.
Hello. I just would like to make a point on the internationalism, taking profit of the fact that, I mean, I have learned a lot, and taking profit of the fact that there are here the comrades from countries which we don't, at least for me, we are not geographically so near, and but the problems are, of course, are common. So to try, I mean, we have discussed on this wars, India, Pakistan, and if I take Pakistan, which is a smaller country with respect to India, and which have not only India as a frontier country, but have several countries, China in the frontier, China, Afghanistan, Iran, of course, India. If we pose the problem ourselves of how is the situation of working classes, how is the situation of organization from the point of view of working classes in Pakistan, and what is the situation of internationalism of these working classes, which is, I mean, I ask to everybody, but in particular comrade from Pakistan, which is the situation of Pakistan today, of working classes with respect to the problems in the near, of the more near in the region, Afghanistan, Iran, China, is a chance to have more more organization, to have common problems, to face common problems, to do not, to try to make a picture, more global picture of the region. At least not, I am not making the ambition, because India is much more complex as China, which have more territory, more diversities, while Pakistan and the other surroundings, if you take Afghanistan, if you take some of the frontiers of China, some of the frontiers of Iran, some of the frontiers of... So, which is the situation of working classes with respect to some internationalism in this country or in this region? Is there a chance to make some organization of working classes, internationalism, more than in the present day? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Corey. Yeah, Dominic?
Did you call me?
Yep.
Yeah. I just wanted to make a couple of points, because I think you've got to remember, as far as I can see it, that as far as Modi is concerned, it's like so many other leaders. When you've got problems at home, you start trouble abroad. And that's to my mind, what he's doing. But the thing is that from our position, there's no solution on a national basis. Any national agreements that come up between Pakistan and India and anybody else on this subject are only going to be in the interests of the capitalist class. They're not going to be in the interests of the working class. And I think the basic point, to my mind, is to hammer home the point that the workers in both Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and what have you, have got exactly the same interests, and that is to tackle the problems created by the capitalists in their own nations. And that nation states, all the capitalists use them for is excuses to stir up trouble with their neighbours. And I think that we've got to take the point that the interests of the working class in all the countries in the region have got to be taken as the same, and campaign on the basis that that's what we've got to achieve. That's the only way you're going to solve the Kashmiri problem. It might sound a bit sort of crude, and where we stand now, it looks impossible. But the situation is, if we don't do that, the whole situation is going to be one of war and the capitalists ruling and destroying the interests of the working class. So it's a small group of people, but we've got to start somewhere. And I think you've got to take the point of an internationalist stand, and that the borders and all this sort of stuff are something that the capitalists use to stir up trouble and cause problems for the workers. And it's something that we've got to tackle on a working class basis, and say the only solution is to tackle it in the interest of the working class, and that means working class democracy, control of the area. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Corey. Any more? Shall we? Roger.
Yeah, just very briefly, I wanted to explain what I meant when I said Pakistan was an artificial construct. Of course, in a way, all nation states are artificial constructs. But we saw with Pakistan, you cannot found any kind of stable entity on communal lines, and it was presented as a home for the Muslims of the Indian subcontinent. and we saw what happened. It actually was separated the two halves of Pakistan by hundreds of miles, and the people of Bangladesh really had little in common, if any, with the warlords and generals who were ruling Punjab and West Pakistan, as it was called. So that's all I meant. Of course, there's a national consciousness now, but also within what's left of Pakistan, there are huge regional pressures and secessionist pressures, and it's a very volatile region, and Baluchistan particularly, which is very important economically to the local economy. There's long been a struggle for independence there too. Of course, India too there's been periods when there's been secessionist trends in the east and in the south and so on. But the point that I was emphasizing is just that workers' unity is the solution, and internationalism, even though that might, as Dominic said, it might seem a little distant and a bit of a dream, but the working class unity is the only solution to any of the problems. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm stating the obvious, but I just wanted to correct the impression that I was particularly, well, I didn't want to make it sound as if I'm taking an Indian chauvinist position that India somehow is more viable than Pakistanis. But I just think, the whole history is such a mess, and it's the responsibility of British imperialism, as is, by the way, the problem in Palestine now. There would have been no conflict. It's a legacy of the dirty tricks of British imperialism, and also in the case of Israel, Palestine, it's a kind of long indirect consequence of the crime of the defeat of the German Revolution in 1918 to 23, because Zionism would never have got any kind of viable base except for the Holocaust. But anyway, that's branching into a completely different subject.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Shall we move to sum up then, if there are no other contributions? We've also got an additional question in the chat from Akil, who asks if Ashim has any relation to Antonio Negri and autonomist politics, and also on the question of the betrayal by the Communist Party of India Marxists. And its move to chauvinism. Do you want to start, Ashim?
Okay, I think some interesting questions have come, and I really like this. A discussion should take it forward. First, let me say that the broad left have, in various phases in Indian history, always supported the self-determination of Kashmiri people, and the radicals continue to do so even today. But to put the burden fully on the Indian state, we are wrong, because if you were to study the legal implication of the UN resolution, the problem was that it required demilitarization or de-induction of army from both the regions, and unfortunately that never happened. So actually the conditions for and if you really have to read this resolution very centrally, it required sequential of the Pakistan to withdraw there, because it was the Pakistan who raided. And so I'm only talking in terms of the UN resolution, that the raiders have to be withdrawn, and then Indian military also had to withdraw. And then the UN Commission, which existed for 10, 15 years, I've forgotten exactly, could have taken a decision to do a plebiscite. So the plebiscite never happened. I do believe that plebiscite is must. But let me put this question in a context, because a plebiscite is a right. Like we as a nation in India had a right to be self-determination, but lived in colonialism for more than so many years. So rights have to be conditioned. Rights have to create, conditions have to be created for right to be exercised. And I was talking about the conditions that can exist, because to me, The Kashmir problem has three frames. The right is, we all agree to that. But the condition for exercising that right of self-determination doesn't exist. And that will never exist till it is occupied by two parts of the Kashmir is occupied by two parts of the India and Pakistan. And there I share with my comrade in Pakistan, my comrade from Kashmir, who says that it is very important. But I think Temos made a very important point. Do we wait for the revolution to resolve it? I don't think so. I think even in today's condition, within capitalism, this can be resolved. And that is our core condition. Otherwise, mass movements can never take place. Otherwise, only we have to wait till revolution. To me, the mass movement can exist here, which demands the conditions are created. I was saying about two important conditions. The first condition, that the border should be made into an international border so that the both sides of Kashmir can democratize itself and demilitarize itself for the condition to happen. And then the question comes of reunification. The self-determination always comes in history in different forms. In my viewpoint, Kashmir will have to exercise that in form of a reunification, in as much as Germany did it in Europe. So the context of those conditions have to be looked at. And that's why I feel it's important to what Dimitrov said, that the nation and class question needs to be really looked at from a perspective that there is a possibility within the national. I do agree that many of these questions were well resolved, and capitalism have to be thrown off before we resolve it. But there is still a possibility that many of these conditions can be brought in the context of India, particularly in India and Pakistan. That brings me to what Sanchez, Professor, you said very important. What is internationalism? Now, this abstract internationalism doesn't buy. No one, in fact, I would say abstract internationalism never brought the working class. Working class always gets into international actual concrete struggle. Russian Revolution was overcoming Russian state. Similarly, in South Asian country, if I can't become a South Asian, I don't become internationalist. My first task of becoming a internationalist is to first overcome my national prejudices and national framework and think of a South Asian framework. If I can't think in terms of South Asian framework, I'll never be an internationalist. The prejudice exists in the working class against even South Asia. I mean, why to go to Pakistan? Why to go to Iran and Afghanistan? Indian working class we have networks. We have multinational networks between India and Pakistan, which got broken up because of this situation of the BJP. We were building such networks between India and Pakistan among the working class thing. We have had delegations going from India working class going to Pakistan, including the BJP delegation. I have myself taken a huge delegation crossover in Pakistan to all those areas. So the question is, and this is very important, that South Asian frame as a South Asian internationalism has to be the building block of what I would call as a building block for building internationalism. Everyone in India will become anti. The CPM, the whole of left will become anti-Americanism because it's very easy to become anti-America. But it is very difficult to become pro-Pakistan or pro-Kashmir. And that is a challenge that we face, comrades. Everyone, so easy, Indian left has all been talking about imperialism and US imperialism. But talk about Nepal, talk about Bangladesh, talk about India, talk about Pakistan, talk about Kashmir, their whole internationalism shakes up. So the real struggle is to struggle for a South Asian framework, and South Asian democracy and peace is possible within the capitalist system as such. I'm not saying it will be fundamental. I'm not saying it will be stable, but at least the process of building up that can happen. And that is what I feel the working class of the South Asian region should come in. I do want to just answer Akhil's point of view. I don't know what gives you the reason that I am follower of Negri. I actually believe in very strong South Asian framework. I do not believe in abstract globalism. I never believed in abstract globalism because working class actually never, it's only few of us who believe in abstract globalism. We internationalism is actually, the working class believes in actually, if they can't be united with neighbor, then it can't be united with it. What does make a difference is that beside the working class movement, there is a huge section of middle class and intelligentsia in all over the globe, and that is what makes it internationalists, who are willing to fight for democracy and peace. The question is, how does the working class movement unite with such forces who are for peace and who are for democracy? In that, I totally agree with Amos that the struggle has to be for peace and democracy. If the working class can participate and win the hegemony in the struggle against democracy and peace, then we will really be able to fight for socialism or revolution and create a revolutionary condition. But without even fighting for democracy, without being hegemonic in the struggle for peace and democracy in my own region, it doesn't matter to me whether I become the internationalist and support Palestine. I just want to share with you, I have led a caravan, not just individual people, a caravan of Asian people from India to all the way to Gaza. So I have lived through this process of going from here to Pakistan, to Iran, to Turkey, to Syria in the midst of war, and taken what other people took a flotilla to the sea. We took the land route to the crescent of what is called the crescent in the Asian continent. We have taken to that. So my point is, it is possible to fight for democracy. It is possible to fight for peace, even in midst of capitalism. And that's one of the major challenges that we have to do. Otherwise, we defer the question of peace and democracy, and that is never going to be in interest of. So I personally would always believe, unlike Negri, that we believe in people, we believe in class struggle, we believe in class taking hegemonic over the nation in which we exist and make the nation a bastion of peace and democracy. That's how I see the internationalism, and that's how I would like to live my life fighting for it. Thank you, Cobb.
Thanks very much, Comrade. Unfortunately, Comrade Harris is not on the call anymore. So hopefully we can get more from him. If it's just a kind of connectivity issue, then we can get some more and put some more up on the website, the blog, or whatever. Because obviously this is going to continue. It's none of it is resolved, despite obviously the efforts of the Trump administration to put the lid on things. Roger, did you want to say any more in terms of?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say what a fantastic discussion it's been, and I really welcome the contributions of everybody and the participation of everybody. Do come. We meet every week. Anybody who's here for the first time or who doesn't come very often, please come. We, as always, have a completely open, democratic exchange of ideas, and we all learn from one another. And particularly thank Comrade Ashim. I know that his time is taken up with leading heroic struggles, and we're particularly grateful to him for sparing us the time and his ideas. And as far as Comrade Harris is concerned, I think it's obvious he does have connectivity problems. He wasn't able to, he said he had no electricity, and that's why we didn't see his face. And I presume his phone has died. I don't know. But anyway, yes, we have these meetings every week, and next week we're having some focus on Latin America. I'll explain to Comrade Norma, who's here now, but we also have another comrade, also from Argentina, who's offered to speak on the situation there, and I hope that Norma will. Well, I'll discuss with her about her participation, sharing the lead off, if you like. So, comrades, if anybody here who's not on the mailing list, please send us your email address. And thanks to everybody for your attendance.
Thanks, Roger, for calling and having this interesting discussion. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you to you especially.
Bye, comrades.
Thank you.